Coming up on the Purposeful Podcast.
Silencing a group of American people because of what they want to say or what they are going to say, that's a slippery slope that I don't think any of us agree with.
Yeah, and if people do agree with it, typically it's because they want to have control over your speech.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't want you to have control over theirs.
Exactly.
They want to have control over yours. It's a one-way street. So you really want to be cautious with people who think that way. Welcome to this episode of the Purposeful Podcast. I'm Matt.
I'm Saki.
And we are already having a good time, I'm telling you. On this episode, we are going to tackle some great stuff, including our monthly values segment. Saki's got a great savings hack for us this week. We're going to delve into current events a little bit. But I want to start with a great quote that I heard this week. And it has to do with something that we've talked about in the past on the podcast, which is that the current issues that the government has with spending and the complete lack of responsibility on that front is something that is purely on the shoulders of both political parties. So this quote has to do with that. It comes from Senator John Kennedy of the great state of Louisiana. So he says this: bipartisan fiscal responsibility is like going to heaven. Everybody wants to go to heaven. Nobody is quite ready to make the trip. So, yeah, that's totally their attitude toward fiscal responsibility, right? It's a great idea, but I don't really want to have to do that. Cut back on spending. No.
Yeah, no, that doesn't go well for their constituents, they say.
No, not at all. But hopefully that quote right there is indicative of what a great show this will be. So we hope you'll hang with us. But for right now, we're going to kick this out to our intro.
You're listening to the Purposeful Podcast with Matt Fiebig and Saki Filios.
All right, brother. So let's kick off this show with the savings hack of the week. So let me pass this over to you because I know you've got a good one for us.
Yeah, we got a great one this week. And after that quote, it's a fiscally responsible quote.
There you go.
So the savings hack this week is on the topic of medical bills. You know, there's various reports out there, various studies done over the past 10, 15 years. And medical debt is becoming a growing and more growing issue we have, and the average person has. So depending on what study you read, up to 55% of Americans have some form of medical debt. And some have hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical debt, and more than you would expect. So what I want people to know, our listeners out there, is you can negotiate your medical debt. And as a matter of fact, I shouldn't say you can. I should say you should negotiate your medical debt. Whatever copays you have or payments you have to pay that the insurance you have or don't have doesn't cover, negotiate that. You can negotiate it as a cash payer beforehand, and you can negotiate it after the fact when you get that bill 6 months later at your house. And I've done this in my personal life, right? All you have to do when you receive that bill is I actually recommend paying a payment first. Just send in $20 or $25 for the first month or two, and then call them and negotiate a lower payment. And that's not unethical. Some people think it is. There's a lot of fluff tapped on to the top of these medical bills. A lot of things that we're being charged for that necessarily aren't our cost. So that's why these insurance companies, hospitals, doctors, various specialists that send us bills, that's why they're able to negotiate these bills. And you'll be surprised. I've saved as much as 75% before just by making a phone call.
That's outstanding advice. Now, as some of you, if you're watching this podcast, I'm going to show you my left index finger, which has a kink in it.
He's pointing at me.
I am pointing at Saki right now. This injury is a great example of that principle. So I had cut this finger with a table saw, and part of the corner of the top bone is missing, which is why it's pointing at an angle right now. But the corrective surgery with the orthopedic surgeon was on the realm of like $58,000 for that surgery. Well, I didn't have insurance at the time, and I let everybody know up front that I was going to be a cash payer. So they negotiated with me beforehand, and they offered me the Medicaid rate, which was 10% of asking price. So as long as I paid the $5,800 before the surgery, they were happy to call it a day and call that a settled account. So that's what I did. That wasn't cheap, but I had a friend at the time who was willing to help me out, and we made that happen. And that saved a tremendous amount of money. Now, obviously, if I had not paid beforehand and negotiated that down, I'd have a $58,000 bill due at the end of the surgery.
That's amazing.
And of course, they're going to put that on your credit report if you can't pay it.
Sure.
And, that's potentially another topic in and of itself, is how medical debt can impact your credit. But yeah, definitely negotiate. It'll make a big difference.
Yeah. So
front end or back end.
Either way. I have a story about 6-7 years ago. One of my daughters had to go see a specialist for something. She was an athlete. And I found out by discussing it beforehand, which, by the way, it's not going to be easy to discuss these items beforehand. Nobody in this industry, it's such a huge industry, and the left doesn't know what the right's doing. It's very difficult to find out any type of pricing sometimes. So you got to be persistent. You got to stick with it and don't give up. But in this case, I actually paid less. I had insurance for my daughter. After my copay, after insurance covered their portion, was actually going to be more than if I just walked in as a cash payer. I mean, I'm not the smartest guy around. I just have a hard time comprehending how that works. But at the end of the day, it means negotiate your medical bills. Save yourself some money.
Exactly. And you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that this is one of those areas in life that is negotiable. Go into a used car lot, you can negotiate the price. Going to a furniture store, you can usually negotiate the price. There are some appliance stores where it's common to be able to negotiate the price. A lot of people think, well, that's the sticker price. That's what it is. Well, I'll tell you what, ask the question. Yeah. If they tell you that's what the cost is and they're not going to budge on it, then you haven't lost anything by asking.
Exactly.
But if you ask and you find out that they will negotiate on the price, you're not going to do anything except help yourself out by having that conversation. So highly recommend that you do it.
Yeah, agreed. Especially if you're willing to pay cash or can pay cash, ask for a cash discount.
Obviously, everyone is talking about Elon Musk buying Twitter and taking it private. So I'm going to kick it back to you again, Saki. I'm going to let you start this one off. Share your thoughts on this one.
There's a lot of them. I actually think this could be a beautiful thing. I obviously, everyone that listens, we're kind of moderate and lean to the right a little bit, but typically a little conservative. But we believe in free speech. At least I do, right? I believe in free speech, and I'm a big fan of free speech, regardless if you like what the other person's saying or not, or agree. So that's a really big deal to me. If someone's screaming from the mountaintop things I don't agree with, well, I have the ability to turn off the channel, close the page, close the book, or click off the website, whatever it is I'm listening or watching on, and just not pay attention to it. And that's one of the strong reasons why I love this country. So I think somebody like Elon Musk buying Twitter could kind of make sure that continues to happen, that we continue to have free speech. I think everybody's kind of realized that Twitter isn't what it was when it first started out, right? It's gotten into a lot of censorship and just banning people and shutting down accounts and into a world of oversight that it really doesn't or shouldn't be in. So overall, I'm thrilled about it. I hope it goes through. We don't know the odds that it goes through yet, but I'd actually like to see it happen.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if it does happen, I might actually suggest that we set up a Twitter feed for the Convergent Digital Media and the Purposeful Podcast. You know, the thing that I like about it is that he's talking about transparency. One of the big concerns that I have is when you don't know what the rules of the game are, right? You know, you'd actually mentioned this before the show, and it had to do with the savings hack, but you talked about insurance being an industry where the government could require you to purchase this product, but not tell you what the price was going to be until after the fact. Well, that's not fair. And when you don't know the rules of the game, but you're forced to play, that's not fair. And that's what's been going on with Twitter and with a lot of social media generally is we don't understand the algorithms. We don't understand what material is getting promoted and what is getting throttled. We don't understand shadow banning. We don't understand any of this stuff, but we know that it's happening. But we don't know what it is that we're doing or what it is that we're saying necessarily that might cause us to be censored. So you're moving now to the other end of the spectrum. If Musk has his way, and he's going to open the platform back up, so there is going to be a cost to that, which is that a lot of crazy people are going to be able to say a lot of crazy things. But that is the price that we pay for free speech. I think that our society is better off letting crazy people say crazy things than shutting down people that we disagree with, because ultimately the people who end up having the power to determine what the conversation should or should not be end up being the kind of people you don't want to have control over your speech. And wherever you are on the political spectrum, eventually you will be subjected to the same sorts of behavior, the same sorts of canceling, the same sorts of issues where at some point someone's going to disagree with what you say.
Yep.
And if they have the power to turn you off and shut you down and erase you from existence, then you're going to be on the wrong end of that deal. And so we don't want that to happen. So I know that we do more of a financial type show, personal finance and economics and business and entrepreneurship. But free speech is such a big overarching issue that it really does impact everything and every facet of what we do. Imagine the financial implications of being able to censor or withhold certain data.
Yeah.
Our entire economy works because of the freedom of that information, right? We know, yes, we want to invest in this company because they're performing well. Well, how do we know they're performing well? Because they have to put their performance metrics out there for people to be able to see and analyze. Well, what if they lie? Enron was an energy company, 15 years ago now or more? And they got caught basically cooking their books. And they were doing all sorts of accounting that was not allowed. And it destroyed their company. But eventually it came to the light of day. Well, if it had never come out to the light of day, Enron might still be around ripping people off and stealing people's money.
Yeah.
So you really have to have the freedom of speech so that you can get that stuff out in the open, good or bad. But ultimately, the burden is on us to have discernment and wisdom about what to make of the information that we're given. So it's an unpleasant reality, but part of having free speech is having the responsibility to discern what speech is useful, what speech is not useful, and then move on. Take it or leave it, and then move on. But I think it's going to be nothing but good if this moves in the direction that it looks like it's going to.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You're spot on. I had a good friend of mine that used to have a pretty common response to discussions like this. And he would say, well, that's the price of admission, right? And, we live in a country, the greatest country in the world still, if you ask me. We're optimists. Our better days are ahead. But free speech is kind of it's kind of the price of admission, right? And that price is that for me to say what I think is correct, I have to be able to hear the other person say, even if I don't feel it's correct. But if they feel it's correct, they have that right to say that as well. And if we disagree with each other, that's great. We can have a sensible, logical debate or conversation about it, which is a beautiful thing. If we don't agree and we can't just have a positive conversation, well, we just go our separate ways, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. We're not all supposed to be like-minded people, and you can't actually enlarge your mind and your thought processes without running into people that don't agree with you. I mean, you need to hear other points of view. So, a lot of us remember when they shut down a good amount of people and shut down some responses and comments during the presidential campaign last couple of years, when Biden and Trump were running. And that's just not okay. It influences decisions and outcomes, and silencing a group of American people because of what they want to say or what they are going to say. That's a slippery slope that I don't think any of us agree with.
Yeah. And if people do agree with it, typically it's because they want to have control over your speech.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right? They don't want you to have control over theirs.
Exactly.
They want to have control over yours. It's a one-way street. So you really want to be cautious with people who think that way. I know it may mean that my feelings get hurt. People may say some really ugly things about me, but I'm prepared to deal with that. There are going to be people out there that are bad people. That's the world. Yeah. Hiding from that is not going to change it. So it's better to confront it, deal with it, and then move on.
Yeah.
And I think that society is going to be a lot healthier when people are allowed to put competing ideas out there. I mean, that is how you find the truth. I don't have the whole truth. You don't have the whole truth. Nobody has the whole truth. But if we're all aimed at that target and we're all seeking to find the truth and we all contribute to the conversation, are there going to be people in there that are bad actors? Yes, there are. But that's going to work itself out. Ultimately, we're going to be closer to the truth at the end of that conversation than we were when we started. And that's the thing that's going to carry us forward. That's the thing that's going to allow us to have the hope that we say we have. Yeah. I wanted to get to a few other events, or at least one other. The state of the housing market. So interest rates have now gone up on the 30-year mortgage. They're north of 5%. And that's putting a huge pinch on things. Obviously, the supply side has been very low when it comes to housing. The demand side has been super high. And so price pressure has been immense. The rising interest rates and the rising prices, I think, are getting to a point where maybe there's going to be a pause, maybe there's going to be a correction. I was reading Ben Stein. He's a guy I like to pay attention to, and his father, Herbert Stein, was a famous economist back in the day. And he used to say that if something can't go on forever, it'll stop. Right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that housing prices is a good example of something that can't go on forever. So the increase will eventually stop. that's one of the reasons I actually see a potential recession on the horizon, is because housing is such a huge component of the GDP. And if people are not purchasing houses, that's going to put a damper on economic growth for sure. But things are to the point now where the price is out of reach for most people.
Yep.
Between the cost of the real estate and then the interest rate to finance the purchase. So the point that Ben Stein was making was that there's probably going to be a correction on prices, but if the fundamentals that are causing the price inflation don't change, then the inflationary cycle is going to kick back in and prices are going to go back up. So the point of this is that there may be a buying opportunity at some point in the relative future that you want to pay attention to. Real estate is a great asset to have in inflationary times. It's a great asset to have almost any time, but in high inflationary periods, real estate is a great performing asset. But you don't really necessarily want to buy in when prices are at their max, right? That's a conversation you and I have had a lot, is you still have to factor in what kind of a return are you going to get for the investment that you're making. And if the fundamentals don't make sense, you don't want to jump in on that. But I've set the stage. I've provided all that information. So I'm going to kick it over to you because you are actually the realtor. So I'd like to get your feedback on that.
Yeah.
Do you think Ben Stein's onto something or not?
You are onto something. And I don't know that any of us know which direction it's headed yet. But if you get back to the basics, I'm the guy that believes, and not everybody believes this, but when you talk about investing, real estate investing, your money's made on the buy. I've never met anybody, even if they disagree, that's been able to conclusively show me that that's not true. So you got to buy right. And I don't mean just price. There's a lot of factors. There's price, there's financing cost and mortgage cost and fees and insurance and HOA. So there's a lot of stuff. Location, geographical. What's that area going to be at? Is the community growing? Is it not growing? So there's a lot of factors you got to look into. So when you do your due diligence correctly on the buying side, you've kind of built in your profit already because you've done what you need to do. It's already there. So, but having said that, we are seeing some interesting times, and we were talking about this earlier. We still have a low inventory. However, that inventory is sitting on the market longer. Anything above the affordable housing, the lowest hanging fruit, is sitting on the market a lot longer, and they're starting to drop their prices. So not only is it just sitting on the market, but they're reducing their price. And there's no longer bidding wars historically on those products. Builders in a lot of areas have a lot of inventory in terms of land and houses in development. So they've actually started slowing down their building process, right? That could go either way. I mean, if they end up with too much inventory, they might have to sell that at a loss because they'd rather sell it at a loss than hold on to it and carry it as a loss.
Right.
The price of the products are going down. Lumber's actually been going down lately, past few weeks. I've talked to some skilled trades. They're not as backed up as they used to be. You have the inflation issue. You have the interest rate raising the cost of carrying the product. And even the student loan deferment, deferring student loan, which is artificially keeping more money in our economy, which actually kind of keeps inflation high. I mean, there's so many factors in there. I mean, it's like anybody's guess, right? How do we?
Well, you can never guarantee what's going to happen, but you look at the big issues and you try to prepare yourself for some potentially outcomes that may be potentially likely.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they are not guaranteed, so they may not come to pass. But let's say that everything that we've talked about does come to fruition, and that you kind of get some inventory that comes on the market because all the builders were building to try to take advantage of the price bubble, and interest rates go even higher and demand slows down even more. Well, you may get a blip where there's kind of a temporary adjustment to the supply and demand dynamics that we see right now. Right now, demand low, supply, the other way around. Supply has been low, demand has been high. Well, if demand slows down and then you get kind of a bubble where supply comes out on the market, you're right. These home builders, they can't hold on to that inventory. Even if they have to sell at no profit or very low profit or even a small loss, they're going to liquidate that inventory. They have to. A lot of them are leveraged, and that's the only way to pay off the loan is to sell the property. So they'll do that. As a potential investor, you want to look out for those conditions. Now, another rule about real estate is that it's always local. So, we're in Florida. A lot of people are moving to Florida from other places. So the real estate market here is going to be hotter than it would be in, maybe a place where people are leaving instead of moving to. So you have to evaluate the conditions of your local real estate market. It's good to talk to a professional to get their feel for what's going on where you are. But ultimately, what you're doing is you're just looking for opportunities. If you're an investor and you're looking at getting into real estate, you can either buy now while prices are really high and supply is really low, or maybe you can wait for another 6 or 12 months and see if some of this plays out. And if it does, then the prices might slow down or even come back down a little bit before they go back up again. Eventually they will, unless, the fundamentals change and they get inflation under control. But if they don't get inflation under control in the next 12 or 24 or 36 months, this might be the best time, the next 6 to 12 months might be the best time to find buying opportunities that you're going to have in the foreseeable future. So that's the only thing. Yeah. It's not a guarantee that you're going to find a great opportunity, but it's just kind of opening your eyes and seeing what's out there and being ready if that does play itself out.
Well, yeah, that's correct. And if you're buying it correctly and you're not over leveraging yourself, you're going to end up okay either way as an investor. If I had to pick a way that I was going to lean towards, I actually lean towards some buying opportunities happening, but inflation coming under control. But I could see around August, September, October, I could see some opportunities come up because prices have actually started to come down. I think you're going to see demand ease up a little bit. I think you're going to see a little bit more supply. So to our investors out there, there's a couple numbers I want them to pay attention to. Pay attention to how many homes are on the market or commercial properties, if that's what you're into, either residential or commercial. Pay attention to what is the average amount of properties on the market for a given month in that area. And what did it used to be, 5 years ago? So that'll let you track as we move forward, which way are we headed? Are we seeing more inventory or less inventory? Because a real estate market is a clear indicator of where the economy is going. It really is. It's one of the biggest, if not the biggest part of it. So pay attention to the inventory numbers, how long it's staying on the market, and pay attention to the interest rate. And as we move forward, you're just going to see them opportunities present themselves. And I don't know. That's what I was going to bring up. I read another article the other day where they said the chip shortage seems to be easing up a little bit on the pressure, and we shouldn't have such a shortage in the chips. I have seen some more stories coming out about various industries where it seems like the shortage isn't as bad as it was. So that's going to play a factor too. And actually I think as the shortages ease up, you'll actually see prices come down.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that goes. I mean, obviously, if prices come down, that's going to bring some relief on the inflation side, but it may also be a consequence of economic slowdown.
Yeah.
And one necessarily goes with the other most of the time. To get inflation under control, usually you got to take your medicine, and that means going through a recessionary period. The values segment that we do every month, it's time for that again. And this one is particularly good. You may wonder when I tell you delegating authority. Well, why is that a value? Why is that up there with the golden rule? Why is that up there with integrity? Well, it's a very necessary character trait if you're going to be successful in business. And it's a necessary character trait in life as well. The reason for that is that there's a limited amount of time, right? We don't have an infinite amount of time. We can't deliberate over every decision. We can't do every task ourselves. Eventually, in order to grow, you have to delegate authority to other people so that they can do some things, take it off your plate so that you can focus on the things that only you can do. Now, as an entrepreneur, I can tell you that this was one of the hardest lessons for me to learn. I've talked to you, Saki, and I know that this was a lesson that was hard for you to learn. And I think it's something that everyone who gets involved in building a business eventually has to go through. I was actually having breakfast with my pastor this morning at church, and he goes through the same thing. We've got a growing congregation, and our staff has grown quite a bit over the last few years. And it's like, well, how do you manage all the responsibilities? Well, the way you do that is to find competent people, trustworthy people that you can delegate authority to so that they can handle some things, which frees your time up to do the things that only you can do. If you're the business owner, it's your vision that you're implementing. It's your ideas that you're putting into action. So the buck stops with you.
Yep.
Well, when you're getting started, maybe you can't afford employees. Maybe you do have to wear all the hats, and you have to do the bookkeeping, and you have to do, cleaning the toilets in the bathroom, and you have to make the coffee in the morning, and you have to answer the phone and all that other stuff. But as you grow and as you develop your business, you need to find the low-hanging fruit where you can delegate those tasks to other people. Because if your time is worth $100 an hour and you can hire somebody for $15 an hour to do some administrative tasks, well, you give that person the $15 an hour and 40 hours of your time so that you can use those 40 hours to go make $100 an hour. Yeah. It's really the key to growing your business. It's really the key to seeing the growth overall. And this is the most interesting thing. This is actually a lesson I learned from my pastor when I was growing up in church. He always used to quote Exodus chapter 18. And it's a very famous passage because Moses is sitting in judgment over the Israelites. Moses knows the law, and he is the one who decides in a conflict between the people who's right and who's wrong. Well, his father-in-law observes that from basically dawn until dusk, he's got people coming to him all day long with their problems, and it's wearing him out. So his father-in-law says, you really can't keep doing this. You're going to wear yourself too thin. My advice to you, basically, this is paraphrasing, is find people who have good character and who are competent and delegate authority to them. Because most of the small stuff, they'll be able to work out amongst themselves. But when it's a very serious issue that only you can deal with, then they'll bring it to you. But in that case, you're not going to see a situation where you wear yourself too thin. And from a business perspective, from an economic perspective, it actually allows a lot of positive things. One of those is specialization. So you develop a system of production, whether you're producing a good or a service. Each person has their own group of tasks that they focus in on, that they learn those specific skills and then perfect those skills over time. Well, when you learn about economics, you learn that specialization is one of the keys to economic growth, because it is far easier for one person to learn one skill and to do that skill repetitively than it is for them to learn every single skill that they need to survive. That's why we have such a high standard of living. But another thing that's great about it is you're actually creating jobs for other people. Yeah. That's how it works.
Yeah.
You're going to need people who have entry-level skills to do some of the entry-level jobs. That might be a receptionist. Yeah. That might be, someone who stocks the shelves, right? There are a lot of relatively low-skilled positions, entry-level positions, where people get their foot in the door and then they begin to develop skills that become more useful. And as they become more valuable to the company, they move higher up, take on more responsibility and more complicated tasks. And that, as they move up the chain, that creates a job for someone else who's entering the labor market. And it's a great system and it works very well over time. But I know so many business owners that just cannot let go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've been there, because I can't let somebody else do that. They're not going to do it as well as I could. Well, they may not answer the phone as well as you, and they may not scrub the toilet as well as you, and they may not stock the shelf just as neatly as you would. But if you continue to do all that stuff, you're never going to reach your potential.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100% with you. And I've suffered from that problem. And what about the line when we say, well, I can do it faster than I can teach them to do it? So that's how we justify in our minds, well, we might as well just do it. But
it's a big one. But, give a man a fish, you'll feed him once, teach a man to fish, and you'll feed him for the rest of his life. It's like, okay, you might be right. The time it takes for you to do it one time is less than the amount of time that it would take you to teach someone else to do it. But once they know how to do it, how much time do you save over the long haul?
Exactly. And so let me respond to that and kind of target, because you hit the economic side of it, right? And then the physical side of the business. I want to kind of tackle it from the spiritual side a little bit.
Yeah.
And to some of the listeners, I might be stretching it a little bit, so bear with me and follow me through this. But there really is a spiritual aspect, a mental aspect to this, and call it mental health, spiritual, whatever you want. So a small percentage of us, of Americans or whoever, this entire world, a small percentage of us are going to become entrepreneurs or are entrepreneurs. And it takes a different person, I'm not saying bad or good, but it takes a different person to want to go through that. and it becomes either bad or good, depending who you are. But, to be willing to tackle on that responsibility, you have a calling for something greater than being the guy that wears all the hats or the girl. You're destined for more. And I don't mean that in a bad way to put down any of the jobs you're doing or any of the jobs that you were hired someone else. I say that because there's a small percentage of people that first are able to do that, and then they have to be willing to do that. And once they do that, you can't get to that point until you delegate the responsibilities that you just don't have or need to devote the time to. But then let's look at it from the other spiritual side. And everybody can relate to this. I'll keep it pretty simple on this side. What happens when you're at work, whether it's a coworker, a supervisor above you, someone below you? What happens when somebody has done a job and they've done it very well and they're noticed for it? They're commended for it. or someone else in their workplace knows that they did this. Or even if it's not even that, they just know that they did this. And they know that they say to themselves, man, 6 months ago, I could not do this. And here I am, I just did whatever this is. Whether you're a receptionist, you're a welder, you're a roofer, you're a wait staff, a bartender, it doesn't matter what you are. There's things you couldn't do that somebody has helped you along the way and showed you, and you've become familiar with the process and pretty good at it. That's a value in itself, I would say. You're helping lift up the people around you, and you're making better people everywhere. And in order for us and everyone to get where we want to go, we need to bring as many people with us, right? I mean, lifting them up makes us a better place. So that's kind of the angle I'm thinking of it from. I mean, how beautiful is that when you notice, the positive effect it has on your coworkers?
Absolutely. And that's one of the keys when Jethro was talking to Moses about finding people of good character who can't take a bribe. That was one of his things is, some translations say not covetous, but the point is, if you put good people around you and then you give them authority to do their jobs well, and you empower them to do their jobs well, you're going to see a lot of folks that are having a greater sense of purpose and a greater sense of meaning from the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
So to be able to give someone a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning and a sense of accomplishment in what they're doing, there's a tremendous upside to that. You can't do that if you don't let go.
Yeah.
That's just the fact.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great place for us to wrap up this segment and to wrap up our show. I want to thank all of you who have hung in there with us this long. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'd like to remind you, please leave some feedback, leave us a review. You can find us on Facebook by looking up Convergent Digital Media. You can find us on YouTube and Rumble at Convergent Digital Media. You can find the Purposeful Podcast on your favorite podcast directory. Look us up on Apple Podcasts if you get the chance. Leave us a 5-star review there. That would be very helpful. Any feedback you have, anything you want to see, anything you want to hear, let us know. Reach out to us at the Purposeful Podcast at convergentdigitalmedia.com. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time on the Purposeful Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Purposeful Podcast with Matt Fiebig and Saki Filios. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to join us on Locals at thepurposefulpodcast.locals.com. And find us on YouTube and Rumble by searching for The Purposeful Podcast. If you like this podcast, don't forget to rate and review. This has been a production of Convergent Digital Media. Visit convergentdigitalmedia.com for more info. Thanks again for listening to The Purposeful Podcast.